The little alien girl collapsed in hunger until a human shared his last bread and water with her. The hydraulic press hissed to a stop as Garrett Thorne wiped grease from his calloused hands. Another 12-hour shift at the terraforming equipment factory finally over. At 42, he'd spent the last 15 years operating the massive machines that shaped metal components for atmospheric processors, his body bearing the marks of honest labor, scarred forearms, a permanently stiff left shoulder, and hands that could strip bolts bare-handed. The other workers called him reliable, steady, the kind of man who showed up early and left late without complaint. What they didn't know was that work was his refuge. Every clang of metal on metal, every screaming whine of cutting tools drowned out memories he'd rather forget. 3 years ago, the agricultural plague had swept through New Harvest Colony, killing crops and livestock alike. Garrett had watched his wife Emma waste away from malnutrition, their medical debt mounting as he sold everything they owned for treatments that came too late. When she died, he'd fled to Kepler Station, a rough frontier outpost where questions about the past weren't asked and survival took precedence over sentiment. The factory district's narrow alleyways reeked of industrial coolant and recycled air as Garrett walked toward his cramped apartment. He'd learned to keep his head down, his interactions minimal. Caring led to loss, attachment to pain. Better to remain alone, untouchable, focused only on the next shift and the next paycheck. He paused at a food vendor, counting his remaining credits. Enough for basic rations and maybe... A soft whimper echoed from behind a stack of discarded shipping containers. Garrett froze, his practiced indifference wavering. The sound came again, weak, desperate, distinctly not human. Against his better judgment, he approached the containers and peered into the shadows. A small figure huddled against the metal wall, no larger than a human child, but clearly alien. Her skin held an opalescent quality, shifting between pale blue and silver as she shivered. Large, luminous eyes dominated a delicate face, framed by what looked like crystalline hair that flickered with internal light. Her clothing, or what remained of it, appeared to be made from some adaptive material that had dulled to a sickly gray. She was dying. Garrett could see it in the way her breathing came in shallow gasps, how her luminous hair had dimmed to barely visible threads. When she tried to lift her head toward him, the effort nearly caused her to collapse entirely. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, crouching down to her level. His voice, roughened by years of shouting over factory noise, gentled instinctively. "You're in rough shape." The alien child's eyes widened with fear, but she was too weak to flee. Garrett slowly reached into his jacket, pulling out the simple meal he'd bought for dinner. A protein bar and a water pouch. Without hesitation, he tore open the bar and held out a piece. "It's okay. Food. You understand food, right?" Her small hand trembled as she reached for the offering. The moment the protein touched her lips, she devoured it desperately, making small sounds of relief. Garrett opened the water pouch, supporting her head as she drank. Color began returning to her opalescent skin, and her crystalline hair brightened slightly. "That's better," Garrett murmured, surprised by the protective instinct surging through him. He'd sworn off caring, yet here he was, giving his last food to a dying alien child. As she finished eating, footsteps echoed through the alley. 3 figures in dark clothing emerged from the shadows, human salvagers by their look, the kind who preyed on the desperate and discarded. Their leader, a scarred man with predatory eyes, smiled unpleasantly. Well, well, Thorne found himself an exotic pet. That little thing's worth good money to the right buyers. Garrett stood slowly, positioning himself between the men and the child. "She's not for sale. Everything's for sale on Kepler Station. Stand aside." The protective fury that blazed through Garrett's chest shocked him with its intensity. For 3 years, he'd felt nothing but numb emptiness. Now, faced with a threat to this vulnerable creature, something primal awakened within him. "I said no." The confrontation in the alley ended quickly. Garrett's years of factory work had built formidable strength, and the salvagers hadn't expected serious resistance. After they fled, nursing bruises and muttering threats, he turned back to the alien child. She had watched the entire encounter with those luminous eyes, and now reached out to touch his hand with surprising gentleness. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Garrett said, lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, her frame bird delicate despite her obvious intelligence. "My apartment's not much, but it's secure." Over the following days, Garrett found his carefully constructed isolation crumbling. The child, whom he'd started calling Zara after she'd pointed to herself and made a sound that resembled the name, proved remarkably adaptable. She learned basic human gestures quickly and seemed to understand far more than she could communicate. Her presence transformed his sterile apartment into something warmer. Zara's recovery revealed fascinating details about her nature. Her crystalline hair functioned like fiber-optic networks, glowing brighter when she was happy or curious. Her opalescent skin could shift colors to match her surroundings, a natural camouflage ability that had probably kept her alive on the streets. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand the emotional resonance of sounds and movements, responding to Garrett's mood changes before he was fully aware of them himself. "You're not just any alien kid, are you?" Garrett mused one evening as Zara arranged his tools with precise, almost ritualistic care. Her movements suggested cultural conditioning, formal training that spoke of high social status. His suspicions were confirmed when she began drawing symbols on his apartment wall using condensation from the recycling unit. The marks were elegant, flowing, clearly representing some form of written language. More telling were the small ceremonial gestures she made before eating, formal expressions of gratitude that spoke of noble upbringing. Everything changed when Zara fell ill. The fever struck suddenly, her skin cycling rapidly through color changes while her crystalline hair dimmed to almost nothing. Garrett had no medical knowledge of alien physiology, no contacts in the xenobiology community. Desperation drove him to the one place he'd avoided since arriving on Kepler Station, the diplomatic quarter. The Zenthari embassy stood like a crystalline spire in the station's most prestigious district. Garrett had never seen a Zenthari adult, but the building's architecture suggested the same opalescent qualities as Zara's skin. He carried the unconscious child through corridors of flowing, organic beauty that made human construction seem crude by comparison. The ambassador who met them in the medical bay was tall, elegant, and unmistakably related to Zara. Her skin held the same opalescent quality, but with mature sophistication that spoke of age and authority. Her crystalline hair fell in elaborate arrangements that seemed to move with their own internal light. Most striking were her eyes, the same luminous quality as Zara's, but filled with an intelligence that seemed to see through pretense to truth. "Where did you find my daughter?" Her voice carried musical undertones, each word precisely chosen. "Your daughter?" Garrett's heart sank as the implications hit him. He'd been caring for the child of an ambassador, probably creating an interstellar incident in the process. Princess Zara Thel of the third lineage. She disappeared during a cultural exchange visit to the lower districts. We feared she had been taken by slavers. Ambassador Leandra, as she introduced herself, examined her daughter with the focused intensity of a trained medical professional. Her long fingers moved over scanning devices that hummed with alien technology, while her expression shifted from relief to puzzlement. She shows no signs of abuse or mistreatment. In fact, her cellular regeneration indicates recent, careful feeding. Leandra's luminous eyes fixed on Garrett with new interest. "You have been caring for her?" She was starving in an alley. "I gave her food and water. Anyone would have done the same." "No, human. Anyone would not." Leandra's tone carried both sadness and appreciation. "Your species has not shown such unconditional compassion toward ours. Most humans see opportunity in a lost Zenthari child, not responsibility." As Zara's condition stabilized, Garrett found himself invited to remain while she recovered. The embassy's guest quarters were luxurious beyond anything he'd experienced, but he felt increasingly out of place. Leandra moved through her diplomatic duties with fluid grace, conducting negotiations in multiple languages while managing complex interstellar relationships. Yet during quiet moments with her daughter, she revealed a different side. Her formal composure would soften into genuine maternal warmth as she sang Zenthari lullabies or helped Zara with learning exercises. Garrett found himself watching these interactions with unexpected fascination, seeing glimpses of the person behind the diplomatic mask. The truth about Zara's disappearance emerged gradually. Leandra confided to Garrett during one of their evening conversations in the embassy's botanical gardens, a space filled with plants from dozens of worlds that created an atmosphere of peaceful contemplation. The cultural exchange was meant to build understanding between our peoples, she explained, her voice carrying undertones of frustration. Zara was eager to experience human society, to learn how your children live and play. But there are factions on both sides who oppose closer cooperation. Garrett listened carefully as she outlined the political complexities. The Zenthari Confederation included multiple worlds, with varying degrees of interest in human alliance. Similarly, human colonial governments ranged from welcoming to openly hostile regarding alien integration. Recent trade agreements had created wealth for some, but also displacement and resentment among others. Someone arranged for Zara to become separated from her security escort during the visit. They wanted her lost, frightened, perhaps even hurt, to demonstrate that humans cannot be trusted with Zenthari's safety. Any idea who? Several possibilities. Human supremacist groups who want the trade agreements dissolved. Zenthari isolationists who believe contact with your species corrupts our culture. Even other alien governments who profit from human Zenthari tensions. As they talked, Garrett became increasingly impressed by Leandra's analytical mind. She approached complex problems with the same methodical precision he used for mechanical repairs, but applied it to interstellar politics. Her insights into human psychology were particularly sharp, understanding motivations and fears that drove policy decisions. More unexpectedly, he found himself sharing details of his own past, the agricultural plague that had killed his wife, the crushing debt, the desperate flight to Kepler Station. Stories he'd never told anyone poured out during their quiet conversations. Leandra listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that helped him process grief he'd buried under years of isolation. "Your response to loss is to withdraw," she observed one evening. "Zenthari cope differently. We believe that connection honors the departed, that isolation dishonors their memory. Maybe your way is healthier. Perhaps both. Responses serve their purpose. Your withdrawal protected you during the worst pain. But now, with Zara, you are reconnecting. That also honors Emma's memory." The mention of his wife's name should have triggered his usual defensive reactions. Instead, Garrett felt a strange sense of peace. Leandra had a gift for finding healing perspectives in painful experiences. Their growing connection was interrupted by disturbing news. Intelligence reports suggested that the faction responsible for Zara's disappearance was planning more drastic action. Several diplomatic facilities had experienced security breaches, and there were rumors of weapons being smuggled into the station. They believe that a dramatic incident will force both governments to abandon the alliance, Leandra explained during an emergency briefing with her security team. An attack on the embassy, particularly one that harms Zara, would achieve their goals. Garrett studied the security plans with his mechanical engineer's eye for systems and weaknesses. The embassy's defenses were sophisticated, but designed for conventional threats. The criminals operating on Kepler Station fought dirty, using tactics that might exploit gaps in alien security thinking. "Your ventilation system has manual override access points," he pointed out. "Someone familiar with station maintenance could bypass your atmospheric controls, introduce toxins, or disable life support. Can you help us address these vulnerabilities?" The request marked a turning point in their relationship. Leandra wasn't just accepting his help. She was actively seeking his expertise, valuing his perspective as essential to protecting her daughter. For the first time in years, Garrett felt genuinely needed, his skills contributing to something more important than factory quotas. Working together to strengthen embassy security revealed their natural compatibility. Leandra's strategic thinking combined perfectly with Garrett's practical problem-solving. She would identify potential threat scenarios while he designed physical countermeasures. Their minds seemed to complement each other, creating solutions neither could have reached alone. During one late-night planning session, Leandra's professional composure finally cracked. The stress of constant threats to her daughter, combined with the political pressure of maintaining the alliance, overwhelmed her diplomatic training. "I cannot protect her," she whispered, her luminous eyes reflecting genuine fear. "No matter how many precautions we take, they will find a way. She is too precious a target, and I am only one person." Garrett moved instinctively to comfort her, his arms encircling her trembling form. The gesture was meant as simple human compassion, but the moment their skin touched, something electric passed between them. Leandra's opalescent coloring shifted to warmer tones, while her crystalline hair brightened with internal light. "You are not alone," he said quietly. "I won't let anything happen to Zara, or to you." The promise hung between them, carrying implications that neither was quite ready to acknowledge openly. But in that moment, Garrett realized his carefully maintained isolation had crumbled completely. He was no longer protecting himself from loss. He was choosing to risk everything for the people who had become his family. The attack came at dawn, when station activity was at its lowest ebb. Garrett was awakened by the embassy's alarm systems, a harmonic sound that seemed to resonate through his bones rather than simply alert his ears. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows as he rushed toward Zara's quarters. The infiltrators had been cleverer than expected. Rather than attempting a frontal assault on the embassy's defenses, they'd used maintenance tunnels to access the building's foundation. Shaped charges had damaged primary power systems, while gas canisters released clouds of unknown toxins into the ventilation network. Garrett found Leandra in the security center, coordinating responses while monitoring her daughter's location. Her diplomatic composure had given way to fierce maternal protectiveness, her crystalline hair blazing with angry light as she barked orders in multiple languages. "Status report," Garrett demanded, falling into their established partnership rhythm. 12 intruders, armed with human weapons but showing knowledge of Zenthari weaknesses. They've disabled our primary communication array and are systematically working toward Zara's location. My security team is good, but they're trained for conventional conflicts, not this type of urban warfare. Through the security monitors, Garrett watched the attackers move with military precision through embassy corridors. Their equipment included gas masks and exotic weapons designed to interfere with Zenthari abilities. Whoever had planned this understood both species' capabilities intimately. "Where's Zara now?" "Safe room on sub-level 3, but the toxins they've released will reach her within minutes, and her young physiology cannot process the chemicals safely." Garrett studied the building schematics with growing urgency. The embassy's design, beautiful as it was, created tactical disadvantages in this situation. The flowing organic architecture that felt so natural to Zenthari made it difficult to establish defensive positions or seal off areas effectively. "I need to reach her," Leandra said, checking her sidearm. "My security detail can hold them here while I extract Zara to the shuttle bay." "No, they'll expect that. Look at their positioning. They're herding your people toward the safe room, planning to trap everyone together." "Then what do you suggest?" Garrett felt the familiar clarity that came with mechanical problem-solving, his mind automatically sorting through variables and constraints. The embassy's maintenance systems were similar to those in the factory, industrial equipment designed for efficiency over elegance. More importantly, he understood their capabilities in ways the attackers probably didn't. "Emergency atmospheric purge," he said finally. The embassy has industrial-grade air recycling systems designed to handle contamination from multiple world environments. If I can reach the mechanical levels and initiate a full system flush, we can clear the toxins and restore normal operations. That requires manual activation from the primary maintenance hub. It's directly in the path of the attackers. Not if I go through the thermal exchange tunnels. They're too narrow for combat armor, and the heat signatures will mask my movement. Lyandra's luminous eyes studied him with new intensity. This is extremely dangerous. The thermal systems operate at temperatures that could kill you, and if you're discovered. I spent 15 years working around industrial equipment that could crush or burn me if I made a mistake. This is just another maintenance job. But even as he spoke, Garrett knew it was more than that. For the first time since Emma's death, he was choosing to risk everything for people he loved. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming alive again. The journey through the embassy's mechanical systems proved as challenging as expected. Thermal exchange tunnels designed for Zenthari physiology were uncomfortably tight for human frames, while the heat from exotic energy systems made breathing difficult. Garrett's factory-trained ability to work in harsh conditions proved essential as he navigated past glowing conduits and pressure vessels. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as he reached the primary maintenance hub. Through the walls, he could hear weapons fire echoing through the embassy corridors. Time was running out. The atmospheric purge systems were more complex than standard human equipment, but the underlying principles were familiar. Garrett's hands moved with practiced confidence over control interfaces, initiating sequences that would flush contaminated air and replace it with filtered atmosphere from the embassy's reserves. As the systems activated, he heard shouts of confusion from the attackers. Their gas weapons became useless as clean air flooded through the building, while emergency lighting restored normal visibility. The tactical advantage they'd counted on evaporated within minutes, but success came with a price. The purge system's activation had triggered security alerts throughout the building, revealing Garrett's location to the remaining infiltrators. As he emerged from the maintenance hub, 3 armed figures surrounded him with weapons raised. "Human maintenance worker," their leader sneered through his gas mask. "Wrong place, wrong time." Before they could fire, the corridor filled with blazing light as Lyandra appeared behind them. Her crystalline hair had become incandescent with protective fury, while her skin shifted through rapid color changes that seemed to disorient the attackers. Her weapon, some form of Zenthari energy projector, disabled their equipment with surgical precision. "Right place, right time," she corrected, helping Garrett to his feet. "My mate protects my daughter, I protect my mate." The word hung between them. Mate, with its implications of permanent bonding and shared future. In the heat of crisis, Lyandra had revealed feelings that diplomatic protocol would normally have kept hidden. As embassy security mopped up the remaining attackers, Garrett and Lyandra rushed to Zara's location. They found the young princess frightened but unharmed, her crystalline hair glowing with relief as she recognized their voices. The moment she saw Garrett, she launched herself into his arms with pure joy. "Papa friend," she said in carefully practiced human words. "You came back." Looking over Zara's head at Lyandra's radiant expression, Garrett realized that somewhere during the crisis, he'd stopped thinking of them as temporary responsibilities and started seeing them as his family. The protective instinct that had driven him through danger wasn't duty. It was love. The formal recognition ceremony took place in the embassy's Great Hall 3 weeks later. Representatives from both the Zenthari Confederation and Human Colonial Administration attended, along with media from across known space. What had begun as a simple rescue had evolved into a symbol of interspecies cooperation, with implications reaching far beyond Kepler Station. Ambassador Lyandra, resplendent in ceremonial robes that seemed to capture and reflect light from every angle, addressed the assembly in both human languages and Zenthari harmonic communication. Her daughter stood beside her, no longer the frightened child Garrett had found in an alley, but a young princess whose crystalline hair blazed with confident light. "Garrett Thorne," Lyandra announced formally. By your actions, you have demonstrated the highest virtues of both our species: compassion without expectation of reward, courage in defense of the innocent, and wisdom in the face of complex challenges. The Zenthari Confederation hereby grants you the title of Honorary Kinsman, with all rights and privileges thereof. The title carried legal weight across multiple worlds. Garrett would have citizenship rights in Zenthari space, access to their advanced medical care, and most importantly, legal standing as Zara's adoptive father. The papers had been prepared weeks ago, but the public ceremony made the relationship official in both cultures. But the political recognition was only the beginning. As the formal presentations concluded, Leandra stepped forward with a smaller, more intimate ceremony. In Zenthari culture, adoption and marriage were intertwined concepts. Accepting responsibility for a child meant accepting partnership with their birth parent. The bonding ritual was ancient, predating space travel, but had evolved to accommodate modern realities. "Before our peoples and the watching stars," Leandra said, taking Garrett's hands in hers, "I offer you my heart, my home, and my daughter's future. Will you accept the bonds of kinship and partnership, sharing joy and sorrow, triumph and failure, until the stars themselves fade?" Garrett looked into her luminous eyes and saw not just the elegant ambassador or protective mother, but the woman who had shared her deepest fears with him, who had valued his expertise, who had fought beside him to protect their family. His answer came without hesitation. "I accept and offer the same in return." The ceremony that followed combined elements from both cultures. Human wedding traditions merged with Zenthari bonding rituals as they exchanged vows that would be recognized across known space. Zara participated as both witness and blessing giver, her crystalline hair creating patterns of light that seemed to celebrate the union. The personal significance was profound, but the broader implications proved even more far-reaching. News of the human Zenthari family spread across colonial networks, inspiring other interspecies relationships to emerge from secrecy. Trade agreements that had stalled in committee were ratified within months, while cultural exchange programs expanded dramatically. More immediately, Garrett's example influenced policy on Kepler Station itself. The salvagers who had threatened Zara were prosecuted under new anti-trafficking laws, specifically designed to protect vulnerable aliens. Similar legislation spread to other frontier stations, creating safer environments for interspecies contact. The technological benefits flowed in both directions. Garrett's practical engineering knowledge, combined with access to Zenthari materials science, led to breakthrough improvements in atmospheric processing equipment. Factories across human space began using techniques that were safer, more efficient, and less environmentally harmful. Leandra's diplomatic skills, enhanced by her deep understanding of human psychology gained through their relationship, helped negotiate peaceful resolutions to conflicts that might otherwise have led to armed confrontation. The alliance she had worked to build became a model for cooperation between species with seemingly incompatible cultures. For Zara, the changes were equally transformative. No longer isolated by her royal status, she grew up with the unique perspective of someone who belonged fully to both cultures. Her natural abilities developed in ways that bridged human and Zenthari approaches to problem-solving, making her invaluable as a cultural interpreter and eventually a leader in her own right. 6 months after the ceremony, the family relocated to a larger facility on the embassy grounds, a home designed to accommodate both human and Zenthari needs. Garrett continued his engineering work, but now as a consultant on interspecies construction projects. His reputation as someone who could make complex systems work reliably had spread throughout diplomatic circles. The apartment where he had once lived in isolation seemed like another lifetime. His new home filled with the sounds of Zara practicing human languages, Leandra conducting diplomatic business, and the everyday chaos of family life that he had thought lost forever. On quiet evenings, when Zara was asleep and official duties were set aside, Garrett and Leandra would sit together in their garden, a space that combined plants from Earth and the Zenthari homeworld in harmonious coexistence. Her skin would shift to peaceful blue-green tones, while her crystalline hair created gentle patterns of light that seemed to respond to his contentment. "Do you ever regret it?" she would ask sometimes. "Giving up the simple life for all this complexity?" Garrett would look at their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, her own crystalline hair creating soft nightlight patterns, and feel the warm presence of the woman who had become his anchor in a universe full of possibilities. "Emma always said that love multiplies when you share it, never divides," he would answer. "I thought I'd lost that understanding when she died. But Zara taught me that compassion is a choice, not a feeling. And you taught me that choosing to care again doesn't dishonor the past. It honors it." The human who had once hidden from connection now found himself at the center of an expanding network of relationships that spanned star systems. His decision to share bread and water with a hungry alien child had grown into something that touched thousands of lives, proving that individual acts of compassion could indeed reshape entire worlds. As their family continued to grow, both in members and in influence, Garrett often thought about the chain of choices that had led him here. Every decision to help rather than ignore, to risk rather than retreat, to connect rather than withdraw, had built toward this moment. The frightened, grieving man who had fled to Kepler Station would barely recognize the person he had become. But late at night, when the station's artificial lighting dimmed to simulate planetary cycles, he could still remember the moment everything changed. A small, weak cry from behind a stack of shipping containers, and his choice to investigate rather than walk away. That single act of compassion had saved not just one alien child, but had ultimately saved him as well. The bread and water he'd shared had grown into a feast that nourished two species, proving that in a universe often defined by its vastness and isolation, the connections between individuals could create warmth and meaning that transcended any distance.